Hello, good day. Sabs from Self-Sufficient Dream. Hope you're okay. Gardening doesn't necessarily need to happen outdoors. It can even happen on top of a small table. It can even happen inside this small jar. That is what terrariums are all about. Terrariums, what it is? Aquariums, you might know. Aqua means water, and terra means soil. So it is a dry version of aquarium, you know? Sometimes people even say terrariums are for lazy gardeners. Perhaps it's true, but I kind of disagree with that. It still requires a little bit of skill set. It still requires a bit of plant knowledge, how to grow plants inside a small jar. So it requires least care. It is portable, plenty of advantages. So let's do terrariums today. All right, so the basic items that you need to have to start a terrarium is obviously a glass jar and plants by default. And potting mix, make sure it is without any fertilizers in it because you don't want a lot of energy and nutrients within the soil, right? And sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is a beautiful soil conditioner. It helps retain the moisture inside the soil. And apart from these, we need to have the soil, wet at the same time, not too wet. So drainage is really important, and we need to make sure all the humidity and soil water moisture absorbed within the soil is drained properly. So that is why we have got the pebbles here. Hope you can see it. And we've got charcoals as well. It helps removes any odor within this jar. Because imagine this is a closed jar. You're going to keep the jar closed in this scenario. So there is not a lot of outside interaction for this jar. So that is again kind of how it works as well. Because you're not going to water as frequent as you water other indoor plants, It still requires a little bit of watering, but at the same time, not as much as you do for the other indoors. That's the reason why these drainage system of charcoals and pebbles are really important. And how it's going to work, right? As you see in the outside world, we've got the topsoil for any garden or any farm. You've got the topsoil and you've got the subsoil underneath it. And what is there underneath it is like, once it goes down all the way to the bottom, there are like rock bottom. That's what they say. So rock bottom, right? So that is how the drainage sort of passes these many horizons within the soil. Likewise, that is what we're sort of trying to replicate here as well as the rock bottom at the base. And you've got the charcoals to remove any odors and stuffs. And sphagnum moss and soil together going to act as a conditioner and helps retaining the moisture. And pretty much this is it. And if you've got these stuffs, you're good to go. Let's do the terrariums now. All right, step one, make sure your jar is really, really clean because you don't want anything other than what you've got here. It shouldn't impact the plant. You're going to keep it closed. All the moisture and humidity within the jar is kind of going to be acting as its own ecosystem. I'll kind of try to explain even before getting into it. I think it's important to know as how it's going to survive, right? It requires a little bit of sun rays. It should be penetrating through this jar. So what happens when you have this setup, done, and you need to have a bit of water moisture inside? And what's going to happen is evaporation happens when the sun enters into it, sunlight enters into it, evaporation happens. And the evaporated water droplets sort of forms around this jar, inside this jar. And those water droplets are going to go back to the soil, sort of sliding towards the soil. And again, those water droplets will be evaporated again, forming as water droplets and go back to the soil. That's how the ecosystem is created within itself. How great is that, isn't it? But it still requires a little bit of care. Every now and then you might have to sort of open this jar, do some pruning if it's a fast-growing plant, do some pruning and some sort of maintenance work. But most of the time, you're going to keep this closed, right? Let's start. The first step, to add the pebbles and stones to the bottom of it. And got to be gentle. Can't be breaking the glass. Where did I get these pebbles from? I actually went to an aquarium and bought these pebbles. But ideally, you can buy this in any garden and soil shops. They might have there. But I found these are like a little bit more, good looking than the other ones. At the same time, it does the job as well. So how much do we need to add these pebbles up to? Well, it depends. As long as if there's like 1 to 2 centimeter of thickness you've got to the bottom, that's what it sort of requires. It doesn't need a lot, but depends upon how much you want to keep it, right? And it's kind of an artwork at the end of the day as well. So don't hesitate to put upon your creativity inside it. So I took this small bowl full of pebbles assuming it's going to come up for about 1 to 2 centimeters. Kind of it's happening on itself already. Now it's sort of safe to add like this. And you also select the jar where you can use your hand inside it. Don't buy like 2 small jars. It's really hard to work like that. I'll show you a little closer. That's how I added. Take a closer look. A little bit more pebbles are also good to add, I believe. Right. It's up to you. You can make it as a flat layer, or if you want the sort of soil to be at a slopey one, you can add a lot of pebbles in one corner and keep the other corner sort of thinner. It's up to you. You can, as I said, use your own creativity in here. But the fundamentals, the bottommost layer is going to be your pebbles and charcoals. I've seen some people doing like charcoals at the bottommost layer and pebbles on top of it as well. I'm not sure about it. I think sort of this combination better works. And I have been advised from other experts that I've spoken with, and they also recommended that pebbles are going to act better at the bottom than the charcoals. Sort of we are trying to replicate what we see in the outside world, right? As I said, rock bottom, always remember that while doing the terrariums. Rock bottom is important. So charcoal, not a lot. And also it's always good to sort of make it as a smaller grinds rather than big chunks of charcoal. I'm kind of lazy here, so I haven't done that. But if you get a chance, time, do it. Right. So now it has got the pebbles at the bottom and charcoals at the top. So this is safe now. On top of this, whatever you add after the sphagnum moss, whatever you add is going to be safe inside, and it's not going to stink or create a reverse effect for the ecosystem that's going to be created inside, right? So before we add the soil here, it's like a plain potting mix. Before we do it, let's add some sphagnum moss. Okay, what is sphagnum moss? Sphagnum moss are plants on itself. So the dry version of sphagnum moss, you know how you normally add mulches and stuff in any gardening? Why do we add it? Because it kind of creates the layer as a filter layer, and it helps retaining the moisture. It's kind of same thing, it happens here as well. It's kind of same thing that it's used here as well. It sort of conditions the soil. You don't need a lot. You do not need a lot. Also notice there is a nice layer of contrast that is created. The bottom layer pebbles, which is lighter color, and the charcoal obviously dark, and sphagnum moss sort of brownish color. Wow, it's raining here. And I am under a tent shooting this video, so it's raining very well here. But we are still safe to go ahead for this video. Right, I'm adding the sphagnum moss. Just making sure I'm not doing it a lot, sort of overdoing it, hoping for it. Sort of as long as, you know, you can see the layer, it doesn't have to be thick layer. As long as you can see the layer of sphagnum moss, that's pretty much what it requires here, right? Now, this is even before you add any soil to it. Please remember, these 3 layers are going to do a lot of work within this small ecosystem. So make sure you have this ready. You can get this in any gardening shop, sphagnum moss, and obviously pebbles and charcoal. And now, straight away, above this, you can choose your soil. And how deep you have to add it depends upon how tall your plants are. In this scenario, I've got these beautiful artistic plants. I'll put the name here, you can take a look. You see, these plants leaves are double-sided. So green on top of it and purple at the bottom. Can you see it? Green and the purple. So I found this very interesting. So I bought it. Because these are tall plants, I'm not going to add a lot of soil. As long as you have got about 2 to 3 centimeters of thickness of soil, I think it should be good to go. Let's see how we go. Add the soil. And you can also add peat moss, you know, something called peat moss along with the soil. That is going to give a good boost to the plants as well. But at the same time, you know what, for these terrariums, you don't want the plant grow a lot faster than the other gardening part that we do. You don't want to do a lot of work for terrariums, right? You sort of want to keep it. Less maintenance is good in here. So I'm carefully adding the soil. It kind of becomes a little bit messy as well on top of sphagnum moss. I don't know if the layer is still visible. A little bit visible here and there. But yeah, it does the job, right? So let's add soil. And as I said, remember about making it look too artistic if you want, as you can keep the soil sort of slopey in one corner and flat in another corner. You can do it as well, like this. You can do it like this, sort of slopey in one corner. See this part? And sort of inclined here, slopey in one corner. You can do it. But in today's terrarium, I'm going to keep it really simple. Add more soil, probably. This is good, but adding more soil is good as well. Add more soil. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll show you a little bit closer. Can you see the water moisture sort of getting created around the surface of the jar? Inside the surface of the jar? That's kind of what I was talking about. So it creates, the heat within the soil creates its own moisture. And when this jar is closed, it helps retaining the moisture within the soil to do its job, to keep the plants alive. And I guess we have added enough soil. I'm kind of creating a small well kind of structure inside it before I treat these plants. Always take, out of these two, always take sort of a smaller plants first. Don't go for the larger one first. Always take the smaller one first. And don't worry a lot to remove a bit of soil from there. You want the roots as much as that's not disturbed as possible. At the same time, you don't want the load of the soil as well. Right. I'm kind of choosing this as a corner one. And roughly done so far. Next steps, I'll make this as a close-up video shot so that you can kind of take a look at it in a closer view and see what's happening inside. Because any steps beyond this is going to be a bit tricky, sort of a most technical part in this whole thing. Because as I said, you don't want, if you see kind of tip is already hitting the tip here, the plant tip is hitting the jar tip, which we don't want. So you need to make sure if it is a lot of soil inside, don't worry to remove it back, and don't worry to take a step back in here. That's kind of always happens for terrariums. I've seen, I've heard, and I've done as well so far. So let's do a close-up video now. looked a bit messy, isn't it? As I said, that was the technical part, most technical part from my experience, because adding these layers of drainage materials and soil and everything is fine. Because this is a small jar, you need to sort of make sure your hand goes inside, or use kind of tools like this. Kitchen fork, that's what I used for this gardening. You know, we're still using the garden fork. And small stick here, just to use this for not disturbing the plant a lot, but sort of still make the soil spread around like a comb around the plant. So yeah, pretty much sort of end of this video, and in the next video probably I'll see you with a bit more interesting stuff. Until then, take care.